Geoverse Part 5 Prisoner of Love by GeodesicDragon Chapter 2 The Name Game. Months passed, and I was still serving my sentence at the castle. Despite being a prisoner, I got a lot of respect from the staff and guards, mostly because of what I went through with Derek, but also because of the fact I was a father now. Twilight had given birth to 2 unicorn foals, which surprised us both. Even Dr. Haywick was shocked, because it didn't come up in the scan. But we didn't care. We were proud of our 2 new bundles of joy. Twilight took to motherhood like a duck takes to water, and any apprehensions I had about being a father were thrown out of the window once I realized how easy it was. Because both foals were unicorns, like their mother, they shared a special connection with her. Twilight was always able to know what her children wanted. It was incredible to see her suddenly freeze in place and then dash into the kitchen, before coming out with 2 bottles of fresh nappies, just as the foals started crying. Minutes later they were content and cooing happily. It stunned me. "If only looking after human babies was this easy," I exclaimed as we tossed the dirty nappies into the bin. Twilight smiled just as there was a knock at the door. Before I could open it, a burst of pink filled my vision as Pinkie Pie tackled me to the ground in a crushing hug. "Baby shower!" she screamed in my face. I stuck a hand over her mouth and nodded to the foals, who were fast asleep. Pinkie giggled sheepishly. "Sorry," she whispered. "I just get excited around new foals." She got off me and I stood up. I glanced over at Ace, her boyfriend, and grinned wickedly. "Well, you can always have some of your own," I said with a smug grin. "All you have to do is stop using protection." There was silence before Ace laughed. "I knew you'd get me back for that," he said. "But I don't think we're quite ready for that yet." "Anyway," Rainbow Dash said suddenly, changing the subject, "have you finally thought of names for them?" "We have," Twilight replied. She pointed to the colt. "This is Azure Hopes," she said, before pointing at the filly. "And this is Evening Whisper." "Those are simply lovely names," said Rarity. "How did you come up with them?" Twilight and I looked at each other. "Well, to be honest," she said, "we didn't." "Oh?" Rarity replied. "Then who did?" "Well, the other day," Twilight replied, "I was going to put on some lullaby music for the foals, but my record player broke down, so I took it to Sparkplug." "That unicorn who runs a repair shop in town?" Rainbow Dash asked. "Now there's a guy who knows how to fix things." Twilight nodded. "So I went into town and then—" Twilight entered the shop carefully, levitating the broken record player in front of her. The shop was full of items waiting to be fixed. Several pieces lay around, and shelves groaned under the weight of parts. Placing the record player down on the counter, Twilight rang the bell on the desk. "Just a moment," came a voice from the back. Twilight stood for a moment, shifting back and forth on her hoofs. From the back of the shop came a unicorn stallion. He had a light grey coat, bright yellow eyes, a well-kept pale green mane, and a large bushy tail. "Ah, Twilight Sparkle," he said. "What can I do for you today?" "Afternoon, Sparkplug," Twilight replied. "My record player has broken down. Could you take a look at it?" Sparkplug nodded and picked up the player with his magic, surveying it at all angles. "It's nothing serious," he said. "It just needs a new needle. This won't take long to fix." He rummaged around under the counter and took out the replacement part. Popping out the old needle, he put the new one in its place. "There you are, Twilight," he said. "Good as new." Twilight breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you a lot, Sparkplug," she said. "Hopefully now the foals will be able to go to sleep." "Ah, yes," Sparkplug replied. "I heard you were a mother now. Congratulations, you must be very proud." Twilight smiled and blushed. "I am," she said. "My husband and I couldn't be happier." "Have you thought of any names yet?" Sparkplug asked. Twilight shook her head. "Well, in that case, might I be so bold as to suggest a couple?" "Be my guest," Twilight replied. And then he suggested Azure Hopes and Evening Whisper. "I loved them, as did Geo," Twilight said. "And that, every pony, is how our foals got their names." "That reminds me," I said. "I never thanked Sparkplug for that. Remind me to do it once my sentence is complete." Twilight nodded. I looked at my watch and groaned. "Great. I've got to go," I sighed. "Why is that whenever we're together?" Twilight asked sternly. "Time always seems to speed up." "Because the universe is a bastard?" I said, shrugging. Twilight giggled as the door opened, revealing shining armor. "Hey, every pony," he said. "Sorry, Geo, but it's time to go— Hey, it's my niece and nephew!" He trotted over to the foals and looked into the cot, a goofy smile spreading across his face. "Oh, they're so precious," he said. "Have you named them?" "Azure Hopes and Evening Whisper," I said, indicating which foal had which name. "Nice names," Shining said as he continued to gaze into the cart. Shiny," Twilight said hesitantly, "shouldn't you be getting Geo back to the castle?" Shining snapped back to reality. Yeah," he said, chuckling awkwardly. "Right, come on, Geo." I kissed my family goodbye and followed Shining to the waiting chariot. I got in and waved at every pony as we took off. "You'll see them again soon," Shining said. "Don't worry about that." "I'm not worried," I replied. "I'm just happy." Shining smiled at me before he put a hoof to his head. "Oh," he said, "I almost forgot. Princess Celestia wishes to talk to you as per your sentence." I nodded. "All right, then," I said. "Take me to her." As the chariot began its descent, I found myself thinking about the upcoming conversation. It could be worse, I thought. She could have sentenced you to talk to her sister instead. I chuckled to myself at the thought of the royal Canterlot voice throwing me across the room as the chariot landed. I was still chuckling as I got out of the chariot and walked into the throne room. I stopped chuckling when I saw both princesses looking at me.